Dice, yeah, ay, ay. Good day and welcome. What if the very thing that was meant to silence you became the reason your voice could change lives? Today I'm talking with Sheryl Hauk, retired music educator, survivor advocate, and author of Piece by Piece, who turned a lifetime of abuse, hypervigilance, and silence into a mission for accountability, safe spaces, and healing through creativity. We get into how music became her lifeline, why she sued her own father and used that victory to advocate for children, and how her story became both a memoir and a roadmap for survivors learning to say, "This was not my fault." Let's continue to keep one another powerful. This is the FYI I Am Damaged podcast. Now, a word from our sponsor. Guys, I wrote a wonderful children's book called Logan, the Strong-Minded Little Elephant. I also created a wonderful children's song added to the end of this podcast, inspired by my children's book. Check it out and have a fun time singing and dancing with your kids or all by yourself. Meet Logan, the strong-minded little elephant who learns that bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about believing in yourself even when you're scared. In this beautifully illustrated story, friends follow Logan through a colorful jungle as he learns to calm his worries, take deep breaths, and remind himself, "I am strong, I am safe, I can do this." It's a story that helps kids, and maybe a few grown-ups too, find courage, mindfulness, and strengthen their hearts. Logan, the Strong-Minded Little Elephant by me, Oscar Luna. Available now at all major retailers and my publisher's bookstore, Milton and Hugo. Because it's up to every parent to show that their child deserves to know that strength starts from within. Thank you for joining me on another episode of FYI I Am Damaged. I'm joined by retired music educator, survivor advocate, and author of Piece by Piece, a memoir of survival, resilience, and the power of creativity, Sheryl Hauk. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. I'm so excited about our conversation today. Thanks for having
Awesome.
me.
It's great, and I loved our pre-talk, and let's get right into it. I know this is going to be an awesome interview.
Yeah,
You have
I'm excited.
such a great skull, a great soul. So, accolades, titles, and traumas aside, please enlighten my listeners who this amazing person Sheryl Hauk is.
Well, I mean, I first want to say I'm a survivor, not a victim, and I can tell my story in a minute. I do have a lot of accolades because I worked really hard and no one knowing really who I was. And I found healing from the time I can even remember because my abuse was a planned abuse before I was born. And so I never did not know abuse. And so I found it in music. And music has always been, you said I'm a music educator. I taught music for 41 years, choral music, fine arts director of a large school. Today, I actually substitute for I say a kid, but the band teacher who I mentored for many years, he called and said, "Would you come in?" And for me, everyone asked me, "Well, how was your day?" And I'm like, "It was fantastic. I got to make music with kids." So that is such a healing part of me. I was nominated for Grammy Teacher of the Year and was a quarterfinalist. I have some tremendous students who use art to help others, and also, they're in Hollywood and they're in Broadway and they're authors themselves or doctors or lawyers or, just people who are able to utilize music in their lives to really be productive, I would say. Many of them probably are damaged. Some of them I do know, and I don't like using it, but I'm using it because it's your title, but have had their own trauma, but also found that music and theater and art are ways of healing even when they don't have their voice, because that's how I have healed through the years. And a lot of people have contacted me since I wrote my book, and have said, I haven't told anybody, but I was a survivor. And people, I was really surprised that I knew who they were or they were famous, and I'm not sharing it because they need to share it themselves, but that they could actually say that. Many of them are in the music industry and, do the same thing. But for me, it's about being able to make music with others.
Mhm.
I don't have to be center stage. I don't have to write the music. I get to share my music in what I do every single day. So that's a little bit of me. I mean, I was, I taught for a really long time. I got a lot of awards. You can look at my walls, but that's really not what's important. What's important is that at some point when I was 50, and that's a journey, I was able to admit out loud I'm a survivor and then start advocating and changing laws and finding some accountability both from my abuser and from other abusers. And I think that's something that's really important because we're never going to be able to put a curb on this. It's so rampant unless we have accountability. We've got to have accountability. And I think part of that, and not always, but part of that is that our abusers know they're not going to have accountability, and it allows them to just do whatever they want. We know 80% of abusers are close members of family or family members. That's a huge amount. And they put a lot of guilt on us. They put a lot of, you need to be quiet to keep the family together. You need to do all of those things. And at 50, I was able to take my own journey and then say, no, 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 there's going to be accountability. And when there is accountability, I sued my own father and I won. And I used that money to advocate and to do a podcast. I wasn't on the podcast. I paid for the podcast. No Child Should Hurt. I've helped organizations with children, preventative programs, and all kinds of things. And so I look at it as two ways of accountability: one for the abuser, but also for those out there who sees the accountability I got and say, well, maybe I won't do that. Maybe you can't get away with that anymore. Maybe we're going to provide a safe environment for children. And that is always, even when I didn't know it as a teacher, that was always what was most important to me, is to provide safe environments. Because you're a parent, I'm a parent. I have 4 grandchildren, one on the way, so 5. I want the safest environment for my children and grandchildren because you're not going to learn, you're not going to thrive. And as survivors, we need safe environments, and our spouses and the people around us need to know, if you want the best of us, then you need to help us provide that safe environment for us to be in. Please disagree with me,
No,
but
I love it because with going through my healing journey, with me being a survivor as well, it came to me to understand it and helping someone else. I love finding my strength through vulnerability. That's one of my
mhm,
little added taglines. And because people would look at me like I'm 5'10, 5'11, I'm a stocky guy.
mhm,
And people are like, wait, you're admitting this? You're letting people know about
mhm,
this? I'm like, well, it's time. It's not bothering. I
mhm,
was I was uninformed about my healing. I thought
mhm.
this was something that I had to suffer through and deal with. This is just what I'm going
You had to
through.
be manly, right? I mean,
Exactly.
that's what they tell you you have to be, and that's not a way to heal.
And once I was able to release that and understand that, you know what, it wasn't my fault. And it's something that I went through and I began my healing journey to know that, you know what, I need to discover myself. I spent decades treating
Mhm,
myself like crap and not acknowledging what I've been through or trying or taking that route of you don't know what I'm going through, you don't know what I'm
mhm,
feeling, you can't relate, when there's some people who can but they don't release it as well.
mhm.
And once I was
Well,
able to do that, it's been amazing to
right.
go on a healing journey.
So what we know is that 80% to 90% of the survivors like us of sexual abuse live 20 years less. And when I was 60, I went to my doctor and I said, "Oh my God, my time's up," right? And she goes, "Well, no, that's a little stilted." She said, "Because 80 to 90% of the people either self-medicate, drugs, alcohol, workaholic, wanna forget about it, or they do self-harm and immediately die." So those numbers were different because we have acknowledged it to ourselves. Both of us have acknowledged it to the world. You don't have to acknowledge it to the world, but not blaming ourselves anymore. My book, in the epilogue, it says, "This is not your fault at all. It is not your fault. You're not the guilty one." And our abusers make us feel that way. That's part of what they do. But you're a survivor. It's not your fault. And so once you understand what being a survivor is and understanding it isn't anything to do with you. And sexual abuse is a tough one as a child, right? It's tough. What did we do? But we didn't do anything. We didn't do anything. And so once you're able to do that, you can take the next steps of healing like you've done.
And I always like to equate it of, someone walking around with a couple of dents as far as being, damaged. And then if you're able to maneuver in life and do everything outside of that while holding your secret, because a healing journey starts when it starts. It doesn't have a
Mhm,
start date. I tell people you have whatever you go through, I don't ask them, but you see it in their eyes. So when
mhm,
you're ready and you start asking your questions like, am I going to be like this forever? I said, that's the
mhm,
beginning of something that is going to miraculously happen. And that, you're going to start, when you start questioning, like, why should I feel like this?
mhm,
And in
mhm,
every other variation of questions that you ask yourself. And then they get more curious and more curious because I wanted to
mhm,
start this for men's mental health. It
mhm.
was it's not talked about, it's non-existent.
Not.
You have to struggle on your own to heal yourself. And if God forbid you're with your significant other that doesn't really understand and is going through trauma themselves, you
Right.
go into that cycle of hurt people.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I think that what your podcast does and my book does is educate the people out there what it's like to be us. And you do it like dense. I do it but like I have a story of my son was dying of a tumor the size of a softball in his skull, and I tell the story in the book. And he was building Legos. And here's the deal. I can build Legos and it can't be perfect, and someone can come and they can kick it down, and I might have to start all over again, but I still have the pieces, and I still have the ability to define what I'm gonna make. No one c They can kick it down, but no one can define what I make, and that's what survivors have to understand, is you do have the control. You didn't have control when you were a child and you were abused, but as an adult, no matter how damaged you are, you do control what you're going to get to build. You really do. It doesn't define you. It doesn't have to define you, especially boys and men, because our society says you're supposed to, tough it out and get going. And that's the way I'm not a man, but that's the way I I worked in a man's profession. Most high school choral directors who are as successful as I was in it's changing, but they were men. I was the only woman there, right? You just go and do what you got to do to get your success. And the truth is that you know people knock it down, and it's harder to scoop it all together because we already have some mismatch pieces. But you're a great example of it.
thank you.
And I hope that I'm a great example of it because we can talk about it. But I want to make it clear that our listeners, you don't have to tell the world for you to start that healing. You don't have to. You have to tell yourself, I'm a survivor. I don't have to be defined by that, and I don't have to feel guilty about that, and people carry that around. I had a 80-year-old woman, I've known her for 40 years, and it's kind of funny. We go to a Super Bowl party once a year. I see her once a year, just at a Super Bowl party, and she heard that I wrote a book, and she came up to me at the last Super Bowl that I probably wasn't watching, and she says quietly to me, "I'm a survivor, and
Mm.
I've never told anyone." And then she walked away, and she went and watched the game for about half an hour, and then she came back up to me, and she said, "It was my uncle."
Mm.
And then she walked away, and she was gone for another hour, and then she came back to me, and she said, "Everybody really liked him." And then she walked away, and she is 80 years old, and
Wow.
this was the first time that she could take that big weight off herself and tell someone. And, for our listeners, I can't tell you enough that when you find a safe person, you need to say it out loud.
Yeah. And that's interesting because when I did my first public interview and we were having a discussion and I felt sad because they edited out, but they were asking me, have you told are your parents still alive? I said, yeah. One of them is, have you told them? And that was my mom. And I'm like, we haven't really sat down and had that discussion because I'm I'm still evaluating on how I'm processing
Mhm,
this journey at that time where I began. And I said, well, she may have gone through some things because of the high rate of, sexual assault just in general, especially in New York. And I said, we're in a state of where we're healing backwards. It's like, what do you mean? I said, well, we're healing our generations in a backward way because they didn't have what we have now. They
mhm,
can't do a teletherapy, and
mhm,
going to therapy was just as much of a stigma as sexual assault.
mhm,
And
absolutely.
those at an older age who want to take advantage of what this generation has now. So, all of these older individuals who have the courage to start seeking therapy. So, I said, that's what I mean by healing backwards because
Mhm,
they didn't have this at the time that what they were going through, on top of the public sentiment was like, you do this, you're crazy. Why are you
mhm,
seeing a therapist? What is wrong with you? It's like,
mhm.
why does something have to be wrong with me? For them to start healing now, for those that have the courage, but then there's so many that don't do
But
that.
yeah, one of the issues, so I do advocacy work on what's called statute of limitations, and that means in civil cases. It's state by state. It's different in every state. New York isn't known for really good statute of limitation laws. In the state that I grew up in, Hawaii, when I started my journey, you had 15 months after you were 18 years old to come forward and sue your abuser, okay? Imagine that. You're not ready when you're 20 years old to do that. You're still scared. You haven't gone to that journey yet. A 2-year window opened for anyone, but they didn't tell anybody. The only reason I knew was because a human rights lawyer came to me. And then the window closed. And so, what these statute of limitations tell the older people, even in Hawaii now, they have, as of July 1st, 2024, if you're sexually abused as a minor, you can sue your abuser till you're 50, which is amazing. But if you were abused before July 1st, 2024, forget about it. And so what it tells the older people is that we don't value it. We're still going to not acknowledge it. And so, because of our society not acknowledging it for the older people, they're going to not come out. There is no reason that they should come out and change their life for it. And it does change your life. People still, especially in my generation, and I like to say I'm not old, but I'm 63. I can give Social Security. I'm retired from my community. Is that I have other people that say to me, "How can you write this book?" my age. We don't talk about those things. We don't talk about those things. I've had a neighbor call up another neighbor and say, "Can you believe she did this? We don't talk about this thing." And I live in a community that's older people. But then I'm on a podcast that has a 30-year-old and they're talking about it openly, and they're making change because of it. So you're absolutely right when you say we're working backwards. I'm hoping that we don't go the other way with children that are young now, because things are still going on in this country that is putting us backwards when it comes to acknowledging and accountability of sexual abuse of minors. In the county that I live in, the statistic when I wrote the book was 1 in 5.
Wow.
It is now 1 in 3.
Mm,
So we're going backwards. We're not going forwards. So we have to figure out a different way, like with podcasts. That's why, I love being here, educating people what it's like to be damaged or have our dents. What is that like? What's it look like? What is the hope for the next step?
absolutely. And, thank you for your advocacy and everything you've done in the past and up till now. It's amazing and all the stuff that you want to do. Now, you said silence has a cost. When was the moment you realized keeping this to myself is no longer neutral? It's hurting me and others.
So, when you sue somebody, you have to show damage, right? I love the word again. You have to show damage. And so I started to look at, well, what really is the damage I've kept a secret? And it turns out I have 5 neurological problems that I've medicated for 40 years, not psychological problems, neurological problems. And they're caused by the cortisol of being having trauma as a child and then dealing with it quietly for so many years. And it cost a lot of money because we took all of the medications, all the doctors, and we added it up. It was almost $1 million, right? And it was a moment to me. It was like, I can't be silent. This isn't going away. This is something that I manage. Now, managing my body, managing being sick every day. So I have to do something about this. And I have to keep others from having to do this. Kids. I've worked with children all of my life. And at first it was like, I just wanted to make music, but I realized at some point it was also about teaching kids how to cope with whatever trauma they had so that when they were 50 years old, they weren't me. They didn't have migraines and SVT and RLS and Raynaud's and all these neurological things that I just thought, well, everybody gets those. No, everybody doesn't. It's when your neurological system is misfired. So that was the aha moment for me.
And touching more on how you said that 80-year-old would come up to you and she's finding the courage just to even just whisper it and let you know, and which was amazing. Many survivors stay silent for decades. Some of your readers in their 60s or 70s disclose for the first time after reading piece by piece. What finally lifted in you that made speaking aloud feel necessary?
Well, it came slowly, right? So I tell the story in the book. I have a mentally ill brother, and I don't know what he's been through. I know that I wasn't just sexually abused from birth. I was physically abused, beat, psychologically abused. And so I know my brother at least was physically and psychologically abused. And he is extremely mentally ill and homeless. We've tried to get him off the streets. And I had to go back to Hawaii to take him there at one point. And I was in the state mental hospital in Hawaii with him. And someone came up to me and said, "We know your story." And I'm like, "What? You know my story? I haven't told my story. How do you know my story?" And my abuser, my father, the same man of my brother's father, had told the team in the mental hospital how proud he was that he had had relationship with me. And then my brother told them. And so they knew my story and they came to me and they said, "Listen, we know your story and it's way crazy. We think if you're willing, you can help other people by going to court and then helping us change laws." So that's kind of how that worked. But it was one thing by one thing, right? First, I went to court, then I started talking in front of legislatures. And then a year ago, it was a little bit more than a year ago, I fell and then found out I had 60 tumors in my lungs. And I thought, oh crap,
Mm.
I'm at the end of my life here and I need to write it down. I need to share with the world that it doesn't have to define you because I won't be here much longer to be able to tell people, it's okay. And you get to define in the end who you are.
You have that legacy of your book and everything that you've done, and that's amazing. And speaking of the book, Piece by Piece is structured in fragments. Lego models, classroom chaos, suspicious train rides. How did that writing structure mirror the way your own memories returned as you began to write?
So I don't think of myself as a writer. For anyone in Hawaii who listens, I grew up talking pidgin English. If you don't know what pidgin English is, go on Facebook or YouTube and listen to some people. It's very close to Ebonics. It is just an interesting language. So I learned to read in pidgin English. I learned to talk in pidgin English before I did King's English. And so I could not write. I never thought I'd ever write a book. And I have a friend who's famous locally. She sang for the Red Wings for 30 years, the hockey team. And she said to me, "Sherry, I know you say you can't write and you're going through this really hard time. Would you do one favor for me? Just sit down and whatever comes to mind, just type it into the computer." And so I did for 30 minutes. So I did that for like a month. And I just had this big giant run on sentence. And then I took the ideas and then made chapters of them. They weren't chronological. They were just stories because what I realized was when I was teaching, I was a storyteller. I taught through storytelling. And so my book began just to tell all of these stories about animals and chaos and my hypervigilance with a terrorist on a train ride. And then I would take them and tell those stories to then give you a journey of 4 measures. So I'm a musician, right? It's in 4 measures. The first measure telling you what it's like and what are the statistics and what is hypervigilance and what is triggers and what is, I have a trigger and it's like no surprises is a chapter about no surprises. I don't need surprises. I had them every night when the door creaked, right?
Mhm.
I don't need surprises. And the second part is about going through childhood and what that looked like. My dad did some really horrible things besides abuse with psychological. And then when I started to learn how to love and I started to learn who I was and what I did to stop what was going on and who supported me in that. That's the third measure. And the fourth measure is light. What did I get to do? Where was the light? And how do I move on? And I have one of my last chapters is called I Wish. And it's what I wished for as a kid, and what I wished for as a young mother and young adult, and what I wish for now. And you can't say that life's perfect because it's never gonna be perfect for any of it, and we all have wishes, but my biggest wish at the end of the chapter is that survivors like you and our listeners know that it's not their fault, and it doesn't define them, and they get to choose. And so, that's kind of how I wrote the book, and that's how it's structured.
That's amazing because that's one of the main things that people need to ignite in themselves is like, it's not my fault. You didn't do
It's not.
anything. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing that you could have initiated that would have made someone do that to you. And once I realized
Absolutely
that,
not.
exactly, once I realized that, and once I was able to apologize to myself, forgive myself for what I was doing to myself because of what
Mhm.
happened, it it is I can tell people put in the work, and it is a very liberating feeling when that comes to critical mass. And
Mhm.
doing that, and then, I never thought I would, pay homage to my preemie third son, because I have a 15, a 13, and a 6-year-old. And he was born during the pandemic, and he was a preemie.
Mm. Mhm.
Doing a children's book in his honor while I'm healing and creating something that somebody can look at, even an adult, they can read this and say, "Oh, wow, like, I gotta, I have to start using I am statements. I have to start telling myself, I'm strong, I'm safe, I can do this." And that's the I am
Mhm.
statement of the book. And
I
when I showed it to somebody, I handed them my phone. I was like, I had it in a PDF version before it went to print, and I said, "Let me know what you think." I said, this person, where did they work at? I think they worked at Yale, and she was with her husband." And I said, and we were talking. I said, "I want to get your opinion on this." I said, "Can you read this for me?" She's like, "Oh my God." She's like, I needed this. I needed this as
Mhm.
a kid, and I needed this as an adult." And
Yeah, I've read your book, and it reminds me a little bit of The Little Engine That Could, just a little bit, but using that positive, "This is who you are," I think the element that I like, there's a book called Koala Lou, I Do Love You, and
mm,
so I would read 2 books to my daughter, who I'm very proud of. She doesn't like me to talk about her, but she has a postdoc from Harvard, and, she gave me a little big koala with a little baby koala with the little engine that could, uh she had printed it out, and I would read The Little Engine That Could. You can it's not your fault, you can keep going, and Koala Lou, I Love You is about a baby koala whose mommy has other koalas. And mommy koala gets really, really busy. And so baby koala goes out to win the Olympics, the koala Olympics. And she doesn't win the koala Olympics. But at the end, mommy koala says, "Oh, Kuala, I do love you. I love you so much." And I think those 2 things are so important for our children. That safe environment of knowing that they're loved in a safe environment and knowing that they can do it. They they have that ability, that elephant, in them,
mhm.
right?
I love it. And
So
it was and now that remembering what I'm doing is when, like how I said, when I went on that retreat, the one thing that came before I was able to have that release is I came to the conclusion. I said, shit, I said, I am becoming, because I cannot resolve the anger of what I'm putting myself through. It is not becoming internal anymore. It is becoming external. And
mhm,
the thing that I feared, the realization I came to, I said, I'm starting to become my children's trauma. And
mhm.
to realize that in real time, it was painful. It was painful to
But I think
realize.
often if you realize it, you probably weren't putting them through trauma. It's the people who don't realize it and don't acknowledge it who put their kids through trauma and do the same thing.
It was in the and that's why I'm grateful, because it was in those stages where things were happening where my anger was just too much, and it was just verbal. And then when coming to that realization, it's like, I can't. And my wife will call me on it. She's like, "You got to stop doing this. I know what you're going through." I was honest with her. I told her what happened. She was in the know of everything. And she's like, "This is why we're doing this. You have to put this in
Mhm,
check." And that's the thing, when someone that loves you talks about this with you,
mhm,
is hopefully not to shame you, but when you realize an external source is informing you on how you're being because you can't really catch yourself. You're too hurt to step out of yourself to say, "What am I doing?" That and
So from yeah, I think you're right. I think what we do is that we have triggers that we don't understand. And so we react to those triggers if we don't, one, understand what a trigger is, and two, acknowledge the triggers. We let them make us explode or
right.
react in a way that is not supposed to be normal in our society.
And people need to realize those external acknowledgments, when you're ready to really understand, and I was ready at that time. I said, "Oh man," I said, "I don't want to do that. I love being a father.
Mhm,
I love being a father. I love my children." I said, "But I'm doing this and I have to stop." And then I realized, I said, "Shit, I'm becoming their trauma and I need to stop." And it was a moment for me because coming from a single parent household, being the youngest of 3, and then now I have 3 kids. I'm not connected to my 2 older sisters, and there wasn't a manual for me to be a father other
mhm,
than, I was fortunate enough that even though learning from what I learned when I was growing up in the '80s and the '90s, stuff was a little more wholesome on TV. And that's where, unfortunately, that's where I learned a lot of stuff and in comics and everything. But that built a sort of framework in my head to understand the responsibilities a person has. I was lucky enough to focus on these positive lessons that were in the media that I was taking in to know that, okay, I gotta do better. I have to be better, and with recognizing, and even my wife putting a mirror to my face, said, "This is what you're doing. This is what
mhm.
you're doing, and you need to stop."
But I
And
think you also have to forgive yourself.
that's
You
where it
don't
led to.
forgive yourself. You have
Yes.
to forgive yourself because there is no perfect parent.
And
You have to forgive yourself.
that was the perfect storm of all of these happening in such a short period of time that lit the understanding of, you have to stop, you have to heal. And then when I forgave myself for my trauma, it kind of reverberated out, and I'm doing better by them. I'm making sure that I'm keeping the lines of communication open. My oldest son, he's a little more timid. My middle child, he's more reactive, and he's the artist. He's very vocal. He took up reading the comics that I do and all the stuff that I'm into, the sci-fi and everything else. Plus, he loves to draw. He's in a film and television school up in Yonkers, the Robert Howme school.
Cool. Very cool.
And so they're all smart. I foster their intelligence. I foster any artistic talent that they have. My 6-year-old, forget it. He's a little rocket. So I don't know where his life is going, but I always it's comes to that, I'm sure you can probably relate that hypervigilance of what we've been through with our
So
children.
so
Yeah.
yeah, well, I have hypervigilance like no one has hypervigilance.
Mm,
First, to describe it, I direct a choir of 110 adults now.
mm,
That's my retirement job, and I can literally hear every single voice. Sometimes I talk about how bad that can be because I can hear when people are using a swear word. Like last night, I had a member who said "f you," and I could hear it, and it wasn't fun. But that hypervigilance always sees things. In my book, I tell a funny story about a terrorist on a train, but with my children, I was super, super hyper vigilant. And for me, I I had no models of parenting. I mean, my parents are, my dad was, I can't even describe it, and my mom was in fairyland. So I had to, when I became a parent, I said, I'm just not going to be the parent my parents is. I read everything I could do. I got a degree in education, but I still made tons of mistakes. And I think the key is, right? We talked about safety for kids. You, even when you were making mistakes, You created a safe environment for your children to learn and to grow. You did. And because they wouldn't be like they are now. And they all have different personalities. I think genes play a role in those different personalities. My 4 children are completely different in what they do for a living and everything. But and did I make mistakes? Absolutely. We all make mistakes, but you're creating a safe environment. And when you forgive yourself and you identify your triggers, I don't think your wife needs to tell you you got triggered. I think that you're smart enough that you know when you get triggered. It's now what do I do with it? And I got triggered all the time. I got triggered when so in Hawaii, when you go into a house, you take off your shoes so you don't dirty up the house. That's the way Hawaii is. You go to a party and there's 100 shoes outside because what you're saying to the people who own the house is that we respect you enough cleaning your house and whatever you do, we're not going to bring dirt in. So I raised my children where they don't take I wanted them to take off their shoes, but dad didn't take off their shoes. And I got triggered like 1,000 times more anytime someone would walk in the house, I just vacuumed. Now, if I hadn't gone through the trauma I'd gone through, I wouldn't have known I would have gotten mad over a stupid thing like them walking in my house with shoes on. So I think that you identify, okay, I got triggered because this is making me mad. I don't wanna be this way with our children, is like you're 95% there for our listeners. You're n t it's a good thing, it's not a bad thing. I'm identifying, I maybe shouldn't have overreacted about shoes," right? But you're gonna overreact about shoes because that's who you are and you're hypervigilant, but you know that. And you can say to my children, okay, I know I'm upset about shoes and it's really, really stupid, but this is why, because it's about respect. And I wasn't respected as a child. And so when I'm not respected as an adult in little things, I get upset. And by just saying that out loud is walking away from being damaged and healing. Or
Absolutely.
that's my opinion.
No, it's valid in so many ways because I totally relate to it because okay, a home with 4 boys, with myself, 3 boys, even a male dog. So we have and my wife is like, "It's too much, it's too much." So it was just funny. But we have 2.5 baths. So the master bath, I told my kids, "Hey, off limits. That's your mom's. Do not use it unless she gives you permission to use it." So the main bathroom is like a free for all. So, and I used to get upset like you with the shoes. I'd be like, guys, please put up the seat. Come on. I don't want to keep going in here, having to clean this up just so I can use it. And it would get really bad and flipping out and everything. And now I catch myself like going through the process. And like you said, whoever's listening, everyone's listening, it takes practice. It takes practice. Now my wife could be like, "Oh, who peed on the seat?" Because I instituted a rule. I said, look, guys, when you're outside, have the courtesy to put down the seat. In here, in this bathroom, leave it up. Leave it up. Don't touch it. You guys know what it is. And that sometimes doesn't get adhered to. But now I'm like, guys, come on. That's my response to it in that sort of tone rather than oh my god. And just because I'm saying it as loud as I can doesn't mean it's going to be heard. So I'm like,
Right.
and
But
they're
it's
just
not
going to
about
tune
the
me out.
seat. It's not
Exactly.
about
It's
the
not.
seat, and that's what our spouses and the people who are reading the book who aren't survivors need to be educated in.
Hmm.
Look at it. It's not about the seat or the shoes. It's about respecting us as people because we weren't respected when we were little.
Absolutely. And I hope that please continue.
I was just gonna say, and by identifying that That's not gonna make us not mad about the seat or the shoes, but by identifying this and our spouse is giving us grace over it and understand where it comes from, we then can address it and heal and move forward with it.
And that's what I love because we don't get this perspective from individuals or just in general, so that when you say this and someone's listening to it and be like, yeah, it's not about the shoes. It's not about the seat. It's not about, closing the garbage can lid. It's not about cleaning the dishes and, just leaving them in the sink. It's not about this. I'm feeling this way. They're not aware. So
Mhm,
once they are aware and say, look, and then it's time to have those conversations in a sense to say, hey guys, I went through something, maybe minus the details or however they want to approach it, whatever this feels best for them.
mhm,
And yeah, like how you once you said that, it's like, yeah, it's I wasn't respected in these sort of ways. So it's when this happens, who shows up in that moment?
mhm,
And that for me, it's that little kid who shows up in this moment feeling this way, lashing out. That's who you
mhm,
see in front of you. And when I
mhm.
learned that, I also learned to stop. And when I have my silence, when I have my peace, and I ask myself, do I need to speak to that little child in me? Perfect example. And I would recommend that episode for you once you get to it.
I think that our listeners, if you are someone who is living with a survivor, I think this is really a key relationship
Hmm.
thing is to understand not to take some of these trigger moments personally and to just strategize about just walking away for just a moment and identifying it's not that we're lashing out at them, that they can come back to the situation and say, "Hey, I know that this is going back to when you were a kid." When someone loves you enough to be able to identify it, it gives us a even safer environment for our children, for us to live together. It really is important.
And for the older individuals who are at the bad end of someone lashing out, it's
Mhm.
it's always good because I felt like the one issue I had with was no one cared about what I went
You.
through. Nobody cares about my
Right.
stuff. Nobody cares about X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
And if someone would just approach me and just say, "Look, I don't know what to tell you, but the way you're acting, like, what's going on?" Because a lot of
Mhm.
people, like friends or family members, would just begin with, "What the hell is wrong with you?"
Right.
And it's
Right.
who
Exactly.
wants to answer that question, you know?
Well, and they're it's negative just by asking that question,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
So you're damaged and there's something wrong with you and you need to just fix it. And that's not the way it is by acknowledging that we don't feel valued. And I think that's a huge thing. We don't feel valued and we didn't feel heard. When I was a little kid, I told people and they told me to pray about it, or they told me, uh, well, it must not be true, or they didn't listen. So when you don't listen when I'm an adult, you know, I'm gonna lash out at you because people didn't listen to me, and it's okay. With the numbers of 1 in 5, there are so many issues that we have in our society that probably could be, really eliminated if our society just talked about child sex abuse. It's just nobody wants to talk about it. If we just talked about it and acknowledged it, I think it would solve so many problems that we have.
Absolutely. And so the person who I was mentioning, who I interviewed, her name is Mandy Hart, beautiful human
Okay.
being. And when that happened, I had a moment before, and then talking with her, and then she looks at me and she's like, she's like, I kind of see you. And I told her about my, what I went through. And
went through my story, and she's like, I see it. She's like, she connected with me, and she's like, I see it. I see your sad eyes. And then I got in, I said, well, this is what happened to me beforehand, before the interview. I was even contemplating like canceling and just wallowing.
Okay.
But I said, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. I'm going through my steps, and I'm being a better person and moving differently. So what I did was, right before I had my interview with her, I stopped. I closed my eyes, held my hands, and I talked to to the little child in me
Mhm.
and apologized and said, look, you're gonna go through a lot of stuff, and I'm sorry. And it was a tough moment, and going through that, doing that, and say, hey, look, we're gonna come out better for it. We're gonna come out better, but you're gonna go through something, and you're gonna learn to heal, and you're gonna be much better for it. And there's gonna be so many things that are gonna enrich your life, your children, your craft, the people that love you, that truly love you, and everything else. And that got me through. And that's what I tell people, that that's something you need to do,
Mhm.
because if you felt ignored by other people because of what you went through, then what are you doing to yourself, ignoring that inner child and not making that connection there first? Because you will heal by leaps and bounds when you have that conversation with yourself, have that conversation with your child, have
Yes.
your inner child. And it is an amazing experience. It is a relief. And I do it all the time now. I love it. I love it because it's a very good healing technique, that I love doing.
So I want to say to your inner child and to your outer child, I'm giving you a virtual hug. And I am so happy to know you and to experience what you're feeling, because you're sharing something with someone who's sitting at home, who's not having the same healing journey, that can. And being brave to do that. I mean, the courage you have to go online and share these things with people are just unbelievable. And I just want to give you a virtual hug. I don't have the right words for it, but you are amazing.
Thank you. And that's where I get my strength from. Being that vulnerable, not giving a shit what people think and say, "Oh, you shouldn't be doing that." I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. It's like, okay, and I would challenge them and say, "What have you been through that you're not dealing with?" And some of them get
Mhm.
quiet. They get quiet. Like I said, okay, the just by you not saying anything, I know what you've been through, and then I double down on the positivity. I said it wasn't your fault. Whatever
Mhm.
it wasn't your fault. Whatever you've been
Yeah.
through.
Yeah, this whole thing of blaming children for outcomes is I don't know where it came from. In my generation, and it's different than yours, children were to be seen and not heard, right? We got told that all the time. Be seen and not heard. Toe the line, do the things you're gonna do. And we know how many people over thousands of years have suffered by not being able to be their true self and to acknowledge who they are and what they are. Um, and at 63, I'm just beginning that, to be able to say, this is who I am, and I really don't care, because I'd like to say, I really don't care what everybody thinks, but I kind of do, right? I care. I do when I hear those things. I'd like to say it doesn't affect me at all, but it does. So, yeah, I'm so inspired by seeing the journey that you're taking and knowing that it's difficult because I take that journey
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
But doing it not for just yourself, not just for your family, but for all the people listening.
yeah. And I hope they take it to heart and not just say, "Okay, yeah, it's a good episode," but it's more than that. It's a starting point. People think they need to start it at a certain point where healing doesn't have a start date. It doesn't. It probably doesn't even have an end date.
Yes. I I I totally agree with you, and it doesn't look the same for everybody. It
Exactly.
doesn't have to look the same. It looks different for different people. So, the way that I did it or the way that you are doing it or somebody else, it doesn't have to look like that. That's why I named the book Piece by Piece because pieces all look so different. They're all different shapes and all different colors in our life and all different ways, and sometimes they don't fit, and sometimes they fit perfectly, and sometimes, people need to know out there with your listeners that there isn't one answer, but people like us are there to help them if they need it, and give them hope, because there's a lot of people out there who don't have hope.
Absolutely. And I tell people, I said, look, it's not an easy journey, like how you said, but it's a fulfilling journey, and that journey begins when you're ready. You have to be
Mhm,
ready. I always tell people, get curious. Do you still want to be the way you want to be? And then how much resources you have around you,
mhm.
independently or those who even if you don't know even where to begin, there's so many resources. I tell people, how can you have access to the world in your hands
Mhm.
and yet you say, I don't know where to look?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much more than when I was a kid. I we didn't have the internet. We didn't
Hmm.
have, phone numbers like 811 if you're just, like, beside yourself and you don't know where to go, and I'm sure you have lots of resources. My book and my website has lots of resources for survivors, um, phone numbers to call or just organizations, or even it has, a contact with me, just ways to reach out because I think one thing as a survivor, our society has set us up to feel lonely because they don't talk about it. And when we meet other survivors, like I got to meet you tonight, it's like I didn't know another survivor until I was probably 62 years old. I know that they were out there, but nobody talked about it. Nobody talked about it at all. So,
I remember coming to that realization with that police song, where that one line is, I'm not alone at being alone. And
mhm.
to be in a city like New York and so many people
Feel
don't,
alone.
and they're on top of each other. And it's
Mhm,
like all you just see is, and the song is a message in a bottle. And that's all you see. Just see messages in a bottle floating everywhere, but there's no one there to read the note. And it was insane to me. I said, how many friends are you walking past? How many experiences are you leaving on the table just because, oh, I don't know that person?
right,
And I get it, the
exactly.
fate has its way, and life has a way of crossing individuals and their journeys intersecting. And okay, like, but there's sometimes you have to initiate that,
Mhm,
and people figure it out. They'll figure it
mhm.
out. Yes.
I have one paragraph in my book, it's very short, that I would love to read to our listeners who are survivors. Would you mind? It's very
Absolutely.
short.
Please, by all means.
It says, "If no one believes you, believe yourself. If they look away, Look inward. You'll find the truth. If you're ready to tell your story, do it in your own time, your own voice, and your own way. If you even drop the Millennium Falcon. So my son had surgery for 24 hours and I dropped his Lego Millennium Falcon, and he was in the doorway and he said to me, "Mommy, we'll just build something new." If you drop your Millennium Falcon, you're not alone. You can make something new too. So I just wanted to share that with our listeners because I think it's really important.
That was beautiful. And I love it, because there's more than one way. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. And when I learned that, I know that I tell my kids, I said, "Look, there's always a way. There's always a way. And if there isn't, then we'll find a new way. But there's always a way to, always find a solution to your problems. Don't meet your solutions with nothing but problems. You have to figure out to know that I will figure it out. And even if it doesn't come, then okay, what's next? And what are we going to do? And what are we going to do to enrich ourselves even more?"
Mhm.
And me
Absolutely.
putting that spark within them, it's like I start seeing the change little by little. When they would not speak up, I said, "Buddy, I'm here. I'm all ears. When you're ready,
Mhm.
tell me what's up. I'm not going to respond in the way I used to before. I'm here for you." My son, my oldest, he's in high school. He's a freshman. He got into a fight with someone when they were in gym, and my wife got all the details. He likes to confide in her a little bit more, and I'm okay with that.
Mhm.
And she told me everything, so I was like, "All right." I didn't get mad, and I text him. I said, "Buddy, I love you, and I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself."
Mhm.
And left it at that. No, no, why did you do this? Why did you do that? You know, I I learned a lot from another experience. If you let me share,
Absolutely.
I was with someone who was going through something major legally, and they were acquiescing to the charges, and his father was there with him. So I'm there. I'm younger than this man while the guy was doing something with the marshals and everything. I'm sitting there with the father, and all the father wanted to do was he was upset. So I was like, "Why are you upset?" He's like, "I knew he was doing." He's like, I knew he was running his business and he was doing XYZ, and he got in trouble for it. I want to tell him he should have did better."
Mm.
I said, I told him, I said, "You understand that this is a wrap, right? This is done." He's acquiescing to something he swears up and down that he didn't do. This is your son. Does he really need his father to tell him he should have did better when we're at the US Marshals and he's doing whatever it is they do to get him lined up for the stuff in the future, but you want to point out to him that he should have did better?
Mhm.
And I told him, I said, why would you do that? I said, if my son was going through something and you see the wheels turning, he was an older gentleman. He's
Mhm.
like in his 60, he's like 60s or 70s. And
Mhm.
I said, this is how you're going to show up for your son when he's at one of his lowest points in his life.
Mhm.
So me having that discussion with, I said, "Look," I said, "you're older than me. I don't want to disrespect you. Don't think I'm stepping out of my lane, but I'm here for a reason. And I'm letting you know that you need to show up as his father, not his judge and not
Mhm.
his critic." And you see, he's like, and I'm a big fan of that. I believe is that Confucius quote of, "You're smart if you learn from your mistakes, but you're
Mhm.
wise if you learn from other people's mistakes."
Mhm.
And me keeping my awareness open to these lessons, I'm like, crap, like I can't be like this. I can't be overly critical with my kids.
Mhm.
And learning that because of how someone else was behaving, every time my kids do something, I'm like, okay, what are we learning from this? What are we learning from this? Should
Right.
I, should I put the belt to you so you learn that way, or do we make this a teaching experience?
Right. So, for us as survivors with no models as parents, we have to make different choices and they have to be intentional. They have to be intentional, different choices. And are we going to do it right every time? Absolutely not. But intentionally making those choices that wouldn't have come natural to us because that's what we saw happening when we were kids, whether it was a good beating or even my mother would take a wooden spoon or my grandmother would take a switch off the tree. I intentionally, even though, there were those moments, I had 4 children, 3 boys and a girl that I wanted to, "What are you doing?" I never hit my children, ever. There is no excuses to hit children, just like there's no excuses to blame children. They're children, and we are there as their parents to help them make better choices and to learn from others from mistakes so that when they're parents and they have our grandchildren, they're making they'd had good models to make our grandchildren have safer environments to grow up in. So you're absolutely right.
I mean, hey, I kind of got all my questions thrown out the window, but it's like, let me see where I can.
Sorry.
No, it's great.
Sorry.
I love this conversation, and this is one of the reasons why I do it. Because even if I have 1 to 1 million listeners, it's like I'm kind of coming to this realization. I think myself, whether it's the muse that initiated this whole thing for me, or I'm somewhere in the future just sending myself the vibe of like, look, dude, you got to start this. You have to start this. And there's no other way we're ever going to reach this point of healing if you don't do this. And I'm like,
Absolutely. Because it's your voice.
exactly. Cause Cheryl, I tell you, it's like, I never experienced that. I never experienced that. It's just once I walked out of that building, and for my listeners, I explained what happened to me right before we started the interview. Right after I walked out of that building, the air hit me, and it's like a door opened and said, "Woof." All the information I got for this, what I want to do and everything. And I'm like, what the hell is this? What is this? And why? Like, I listen to podcasts. I don't do podcasts. And
Mhm.
no, it'll be great. You'll focus on men's mental health and talk to people with interesting views. They've been through stuff. You've been through stuff. You always have wisdom for people. I'm sure they have some internal wisdom and you'll bring it out of them. And here's the name of the show. Like, that's how it came to me. And I'm like, what is this? And for those people that actually have gone through that, I don't know if you've gone through that with your creativeness and music and everything like that, that I will never ever forget that feeling of receiving such information and be like, wow. And then it puts me in front of people like you, in front of all the 70 plus people. I'm probably gonna hit 100 episodes this year. I'm have people lined up until June who wanna interview me. Now I switched it up and I want to be interviewed and talk to people and just spread this
Mhm.
out. And just
Because
like
you've found your voice. You've
exactly.
found your voice. And especially for survivors of childhood sexual assault, finding our voice is the number one thing that needs to happen. And you found it. And whether you believe in a God or believe in a higher power or just believe in the universe, you had a moment that came to you and said, you need to have your voice. And I haven't had that moment in my book. I do describe, I have a little turtle, a honu, on the cover of my book. And it's because when I was going through my court battle, I went to North Shore in Oahu, and I got in the water in the rain, and this 100-year-old honu came and swam with me for 45 minutes. And I tell the story about it. And he looked at me in my eyes and he followed me to shore. And so your moment of, I've got to do this, right? My moment of, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay came in that moment. I looked into that ancient Honu's eyes. So we all have at some point, I think, if we're open to it, some people aren't open to it. I think you have to be open and listen to the messages that you're given. If you don't listen, if you shut it out, you'll never hear it. But you were open because you could have walked away from that building. You didn't have to go in, and you didn't. You went in the building, and it gave you that moment that you listened, that you needed people to hear your voice. Again, inspiring and amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. So is your story. And the one question I do really want to ask you, because since your career, your path, and everything else in your creative path, as long as a longtime educator, what are some practical things teachers, parents, and mentors can do to create classrooms and homes where kids feel believed, protected, and less alone?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So, first of all, we go to college and we learn whatever subjects we're going to teach. And teachers are so concerned on making sure that their test scores are good and that their subject matter is going to be creative for students, that they forget that students aren't going to learn until they feel completely safe in their classrooms. Right now, it's a really hard time. I live in West Bloomfield, Michigan. We've been on international news in the last month, right? If any listener knows, we had a terrorist, I'd like to call him a terrorist, who came into one of our temples 2 blocks from my grandson's school, and really we're very blessed with the first responders and the people that saved our children and our community, but it's not a safe place for children right now in our world. And so, how, as teachers, can we make it physically safe, emotionally safe, and psychologically safe? And how do you build that community in your classroom? And that has to be the number one thing before you do all of that curriculum stuff, right? Physical. How did you set up your room? Is your room safe? Have you taught them and let them know how you're going to react if something happens, what your priority is? When you see bullying, are you walking away from that? Or are you the leader of modeling not bullying and making a community that psychologically and physically supports all of those students in that classroom? And that takes a bravery as well, because if you were a survivor, you haven't told anybody else, and you see something, are you brave enough to say to that student, "Hmm, are you telling me that your stepfather?" Question mark. That's hard for us to say. But
Yeah.
as educators, we have to, and the law says we have to, but so often we don't set up those environments for students. So again, physical safety, psychological safety, and then intellectual safety. Do you have a room where children can be curious and have different beliefs and different ideas and feel safe enough to share those in your classroom? So that is, I could do a whole conference on it, but I can't say that enough to new teachers because they pound in us our curriculum, but they're never gonna learn the curriculum. They're never going to. One of the reasons I became such a successful choir teacher was because when you sing, you're sharing your voice, right? And it's the most personal thing you have. And if you don't feel safe, You're not going to share your voice. And I learned very early on that the number one thing was to make a safe environment because I wanted them to sing well.
Hmm.
That's when I first started teaching. But I learned it wasn't about the singing, it was about creating a community and environment. So that would be my advice.
That's perfect. And yeah, that's one thing that I do my best to, even if my kids are lacking that in school for whatever reason, I make sure to have that so inclusive in my home and setting up everything so that it's not an effort, a Herculean effort just to do something as simple. You know, my oldest loves to go out on his scooter. I give him a space to store it and make sure getting him to, hey, look, you got to work on it, you know? So getting him hands on and getting that experience, making sure my son has access to the comics I had from like 20, 30, 40 years ago, hey, he's reading them. He's like, wait, I seen these online. And I'm like, yeah, I actually had them. I bought them when they came out. Enjoy them. Take it. A matter of fact, go online. I know a couple of places where you can read them on your iPad and experience those lessons that made me who I am in such an
Mhm.
awesome way. Not that mindless stuff. And yeah, I mean, even then I have a wall full of Legos because my oldest, who is not into the
Mhm.
comics that I do, but he loves doing Legos. It got to the point where his part of the house, where he has about almost a third of the hallway and it kind of makes a 90-degree turn, we I just gave him like some of these shelves, gave him some of those and gave him some floating shelves. He puts all his Legos on there that he created so that when he walks out of his room, he's proud to see all his Legos on the wall. And I'm like, buddy, I got you. I got you.
That's that I did the same thing, but then I decided to dust underneath. Boom, it was on the floor.
I would say if that ever happens again, I told my son, I was like, don't touch him. Just let's get an air canister.
There you go. I wish I'd thought of that, but then I wouldn't have had my book, so
That's perfect. Now, Cheryl, I mean, let us know where, unless you want, if you have something else that we may have not touched on, let us know where the listeners um, can go for a graceful, transformational starting point for, if your story has resonated with them and where they can go and where they can get your book and anything else you want to impart to us so that
yeah,
they can, how I love to say is just get curious, get curious.
yeah. Well, I would love for them to take the journey with me on my book. Some people see it and, it's about a child that went through sexual trauma, but it has a lot of light. And so it's on all the platforms. They can get it on Amazon. But if they want to know more about me, because again, you have to feel safe to read something like that. And they've listened, if they want to know more about me, hear some of the music I've made, they can go on my website, which is my name, Sheryl Hauk, SHERYLHAUK.com. And there's even a contact page that they can contact me and say, hey, I heard you on the podcast. And I just, want to share something with you or, I didn't agree with you because I think it's really important too that we listen as survivors to other people because they have different experiences. So if anybody wants to contact me, they can do it through the website. There are also lots of resources inside the book. There's lots of resources that are on the website that you can go to if you feel like you need that. And again, you're gonna do this in your own time, survivors, but the last thing I want to say to educators and to people living with survivors is read the book and be educated about what it's like. Because when you have more grace and when you have more understanding, it makes it easier and safer for us, and it makes the whole world easier and safer. And that's what we want. We want the world to be safer. We want the world to be a more productive place because many of us And I don't think we said this, but it's important to remember. We just survived for a long time, minute by minute, day by day. But I can truly say I'm not surviving anymore. I'm starting to thrive. And that's where we want everyone to be. Don't just be a survivor, but be a thriver.
Beautiful. And thank you for your time. Thank you for doing what you do that has attracted my journey to yours and your purpose to mine. And thank you for your insight. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your strength and everything under the sun. And just thank you so much. I can say this and I'm not sugarcoating it. I'm more enriched by meeting you and your journey, your mission, and I appreciate your time because I know this could have
Well,
been, water under the bridge or whatever, but no, I never treat any guest of mine like that or any episode. It's just I pour it all, and I know I'm probably gonna sleep well tonight. I love this conversation, and I love the vulnerability, and thank you so much for bearing everything so that other individuals can heal as well.
well done to you. And I hope that this is not the last conversation you and I have because I am so inspired by you and I'm so excited to see your children grow and hear what you have in store.
Thank you. I will make sure that all your contact information for those listening can reach out to you. They know how to reach out to me, and I hope that brings us some more enriching experiences.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much for this. I needed this. I really I enjoy every conversation that that is cultivated into all this experience and our conversation. It hit me directly in the heart in such a good way.
Well, I'm so glad, and I enjoyed this so much. To meet a man who is brave enough to champion what I do is amazing. So thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome.
This was one of my most impactful episodes. If you've ever felt like your pain was too old, too complicated, or too shameful to name, Cheryl's story says otherwise. We heard how she turned survival into advocacy, created a book shaped by memory and music, and built a message that centers safety, accountability, and the truth that survivors get to define who they are. Her voice is a reminder that healing is not forgetting, it is telling the truth and refusing to let trauma write the ending. Continue to heal, continue to love yourself and your scars. Those scars are there for a reason. Adelante, siempre por tu mente. Forward, always for your mind. This is the FYI I Am Damaged podcast. Stay tuned for that wonderful upbeat children's song I created. Play for your little ones and let the silly dancing and singing begin.
In the bright green jungle where the tall trees sway, lived a little elephant who felt big fins. Every day Logan loved to splash and play by the riverside, but sometimes wobbly legs made him wanna run and hide. Tummy doing flips like a stormy shaking drum. A tiny voice inside him whispered, what if I can't have fun? Then Brandon the wise monkey smiled from the tree, said, little friend, take a breath, come and sit with me. Feel your feet on the ground, feel your hand on your heart. We're breathing together, that's how courage starts. I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. Breathe it in slow, let it out with a wish. When my mind feels wiggly like a monkey in the trees, I calm my heart down with my breath and my knees. I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. Step by step forward through this, scared and know what if. Even when my tummy feels funny and tight, I can still be brave, I can still shine bright. Next day in the jungle they played a game of tag. Logan felt the nerve drag, but he remembered Brandon and the tools he had inside. Took a deep, gentle breath instead of running off to hide. Breathe in the sunshine, breathe out all the fear. Stomped his big elephant feet and felt his courage appear. With the wiggle of his trunk and a lap so free, whispered to himself, there's a lion heart in me. His friends saw him smiling as he joined in the game. They asked, Logan, what's your secret? You don't look the same. He said, when my thoughts get loud, I don't have to stay small. I breathe and move my body and I stand up tall. I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. Breathe it in slow, let it out with a wish from my mind. Be wiggly like a monkey in the trees. I calm my heart down with my breath and my knees. I am strong, I am safe, I can do this step by step forward through the scared and oh what if. Even when my tummy feels funny and tight, I can still be brave. I can still shine bright. Little heart listening, this song is for you. It's okay to feel scared, that feeling's true. But just like Logan in the jungle so wide, you've got quiet, steady strength living inside. So breathe in slowly, feel your feet on the floor. Let your shoulders soften, you don't need to. Whisper to yourself when the worries rush through. I am strong, I am safe, and I know what to do. I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. Breathe it in slow, lay it out with a wish. When my mind feels wiggly like a monkey in the trees. I calm my heart down with my breath and my knees. I am strong, I am safe, I can do this step by step forward through the skin and know what is. Logan showed the jungle and I show the world. There's a strong light hero in every boy and girl in the bright green jungle. When the stars shine above, brave little hearts fall asleep, feeling safe and loved.